Like I was joking, it's kind of like a points-based system. It's like, how did I do this? Did I do well? Did I succeed? Did I pass? Did I tick the boxes? You know, was this fulfilling? Did I manage? And I think that's something that I find not, what's the word, like that's something I think if you're a secure person that you don't have. It's not necessarily about ticking the boxes and the correct exchange of manners. It's being able to actually more center yourself on your intuition. And this gets phrased in a church way as, you know, you gotta love your neighbor as you love yourself. Hence, love yourself. Love yourself before you love another person. And I don't like that because, you know, as I was having a discussion with a friend, I was like, well, I only care for myself because I care for other people. Like I'm not particularly, like I would not have improved if I didn't love my friend, and I wouldn't have improved if I didn't, like I just think like any time that I have tried to improve as a person has been because I loved somebody else. And I say this and it's making me sound like a dreadful person, which I am not. I am an average person when it comes to communication and relationships with other people. I think I tend to emphasize the negative aspects just because it keeps me on track and because I have a puritanical mindset for myself, not for other people necessarily. Maybe for other people in some way where, you know, I ask a lot of people. I try not to, but I do. And I think, and again, does that come into attachment theory? I'm disorganized. I don't know what reality is. I have to constantly test it. Where's the boundary? I don't understand anything. It's confusing. Sometimes things work, sometimes they don't. I don't, you know, I have to become a scientist of my life. And I haven't come from a traumatic situation. I mean, I'm sure like things, you know, trauma gets classed as different things, but it's a missing of something which should have gone better to aid in better stability, better communication, and, you know, some point along the way got missed and you ended up being confused or hurt and it wasn't intentional. You know, it doesn't have to be like the most obvious definitions of trauma. Yeah, it is kind of true that you do need to love yourself before you love somebody else. And I'll say this because it's a way of getting out of that tick box system of, did I do everything correctly? Was I correct? Because that tick box system is relying on feedback from other people, which other people might not always be able to give you. You might not always get that from somebody because maybe they don't understand. Maybe they're confused and hurting. Maybe they're preoccupied in some way. Or perhaps you misread things, which, you know, because it's all hidden behind in the person. It's not the words, it's not the manners, it's everything is kind of a metaphor on top of like the fundamental thing, which maybe you won't get at. I don't know. Like I always try to get at things because I'm analytical by nature and I'm interested in people. And people always ask me, like, are you interested in people as people or are you interested in people as subjects? And, you know, because of the way I come across, I think. And I only come across that way because I'm socially anxious and because I ask a lot of myself in interactions with people, and so it takes a lot from me. And again, is that part of the tick box system? I don't know, but it's I am genuinely curious about people and as subjects, but as people mostly actually because I don't know. But then I'm a creative person, so I do store things in my mind and construct things, and I'm just interested in life and in people in this way. But, you know, this isn't a video for me to self-justify. This is a video that I wanted to make to express an opinion on this idea of love your neighbour as you love yourself. Well, can you love another person if you don't love yourself? Well, if you loved yourself, you wouldn't need the tick box system to rely on things going well. You would be centered and stable and calm within yourself and then able to give to the other person from that position of that stable and calmness. But then as humans, we necessarily need this interface with the other to mutually engage in some way, and that's why, you know, if you see people who are on their own, to an extent, or to an extent, it's almost always the case that there is a reason for it, which isn't to say it isn't fruitful to try to plumb the depths of that person and integrate them, which, you know, I've encountered some people in my life who were like fundamentally negative and didn't have like a, I don't know, just some friends that I had like that I felt sad for, but I could also see like why they were in that position because they've done that to themselves, and I've done that to myself as well. You know, I've been the unpleasant person who nobody wanted to be friends with. We were in the last of the lockdowns, and I had this friend. She was international, and I spent a lot of time with her. We were very similar. She was also INTP, and I used to go to her flat, and she was going through a lot, and I knew that she was going through a lot, and I knew that she wanted somebody to save her, which sounds really arrogant, but that's the way she would behave towards other people, is like, are you my savior? No, you're not my savior. Okay, goodbye. And I also wanted that from her, I think, and I was older than her, and also I was more stable than her well, was I more stable than her? Actually, probably not, but in terms of life experiences, definitely been through less, and or been through different things. And she, you know, I just remember I was like really neglecting myself and not taking care of myself, and so I couldn't help her and she couldn't help me, and it seemed like I didn't care about her, and it's because I wasn't respecting myself. Like, I remember showing up to her flat, and you know, she was moving out and there's just boxes everywhere, and she's like almost crying and sort of like crooked in on herself, and I just didn't know how to, because something in me, there's like that permissiveness, which the permission that we require for some reason as INTPs, we're like vampires, you have to invite us in, and I wasn't being invited. But like, if I had taken the initiative and been more stable within myself instead of waiting for that, and I didn't, and I was just, you know, I was dressed in some disgusting coat, and you know, I'd come to drop off books that she'd asked me to bring back because our friendship had kind of died at that point, and I hadn't washed for days, and you know, this wasn't lockdown. Like, this was, I think lockdown actually I improved. I think my life was worse before lockdown. I was obviously depressed and like not the kind of person you would want to be around, and had I shown up from a position of strength in myself and taking care of myself and been, you know, not to say successful in like running a company, but successful enough that I was being able to support myself, and then I could have supported her, and then I would have been appealing to her, and then I wouldn't have needed her reassurance, and I wouldn't have needed, you know, so it does make sense in that way to love your neighbour as you love yourself, because if you don't love yourself, if you're not helping yourself, how can you help anybody else? That is true, and I see that. And even though it takes meeting other people for me to want to be able to do better, and so that's also interesting. But then I guess it's like that dynamic, right, is that we need people around us to feel motivated, to feel human, to feel that there is something higher to aspire towards. But then we also need a stability and a security in who we are, and I think, you know, really valuing your life and valuing your friendships, and then the problem, I think, and I don't know if this is just as INTPs for all types of extroverted intuition and prospecting, or if this is just a me thing, but I always found it very hard to narrow down to your values, like to select some values or select some principles or select some friends, because I'm just porous and open to everybody and everything, and it's not always a good thing. It's draining. I do not protect myself, which I recently met with, you know, you find out I bring out conversations that I've had with other people, because again, I'm never certain. I don't know what certainty is. I can be very certain in theories because I've gathered enough data and I've sort of formed this framework for how I understand things, or I can be certain on vibe because again, I'm a very intuitive vibe person. You know, she was saying you don't really protect your boundaries. Like, if somebody, and in fact, if somebody does call you autistic, you don't deflect it back onto them. you just sort of say, oh no, I'm not, or act as if you don't believe autism exists. You're being vague and unclear. You're not standing by any principle. You're not protecting your energy. You're just... And it's very hard to do that, like to narrow things down to principles, to narrow things down to friendships, to narrow things down to certainty in who you are and what you value in your life. And I think through being able to do that, I think you then end up with more mental energy for your intellect and for loving other people. So perhaps that's part of loving yourself as you're going to love your neighbour. But I don't know. It's something that... It's a strange concept, and it's something that when people say it to you, you naturally object to it. You just think, oh, shut up with your self-help nonsense. But there's definitely a lot of wisdom in that, and yeah, I regret sometimes, things that I have done from a position of not having that, like not being able to help that friend who was almost crying, who was just totally lost in the world of nobody. I love making myself sound like a horrible person, by the way. I'm sure at some points, it wasn't like totally black and white, but I did things wrong and I'm aware of it. I hurt her. I wasn't able to love her. And I think also, and she hurt me and she wasn't able to love me, but if I'd loved myself and then loved her, things would have been different. There would have been a different dynamic. We'd still be friends today. We still technically are friends. It's just... I haven't spoken to her for a very long time, but I really admire her, and I think she was a very big influence on my life. But a lot of people aren't able to express themselves, or they express themselves, but in ways that you aren't picking up. And if you are able to sit back in a security, not sit back in rational detachment from feelings and from people and analyze them, I mean sit back within your feelings and be aware of what you think and what you feel and what you're intuiting from an emotionally aware perspective. Because it's very easy to sit back rationally and totally detach and be like the mind hovering above everybody. But that doesn't help. It won't make sense of life for you. You will be far weaker in your intellect if you do that, and far weaker in your own emotional expression, and your relationships with people will suffer. To be able to be aware of how you're feeling towards somebody, what you seem to be picking up from them, or how they seem to express themselves. It doesn't have to be, and it's not possibly not going to fit the conventions of what you would expect as expression, and things often aren't personal either. And I think so if you're able to love yourself and not ask for that assurance, but naturally we crave that assurance, and that's why things are hard. But it reminds me of a song I came across recently, and again, this does go back to, perhaps again in this effort to love myself, is to reconnect with the fact that I am in fact a half Greek Cypriot who is stuck here, like not knowing who I am or who my father is, who seemingly wants nothing to do with me, and being a bit like identityless. And I don't know how much of connection is your responsibility or the other person's responsibility, but I do think that it's both harder and easier than it looks, and yeah, it does come down to, I could just say my friend and I, we were incompatible because we were both INTPs, and so neither of us could help the other person, or she was this, or like I was that, and she didn't care about me, and then I didn't care about her. It wasn't really that, it was just like I was just weak, and I couldn't be the one standing up. Like not everybody is going to stand up, and yeah, we hope things are mutually beneficial, but then that's also not always beneficial, because it goes back to this strange gateway idea of like the strangest thing is right in front of your eyes. Like maybe you don't see that, maybe that doesn't come to you immediately, maybe it does and you're not aware of it because you're not able to rest within yourself in security and pick up these signals and intuit the correct thing to do. You react based on emotions, you react based on fears, you react based on conventions. And so it's a really strong point of wisdom to love your neighbour as you love yourself, because that security, that strength, and also that attractiveness which you have when you love yourself is You know, I do think I love myself in some ways. I love my intellect. I love my weirdness. So, you know, these are things, this charisma, I'm very able to give this in a couple of instances. But on the whole, as a person, I'm not a wholly attractive person because I'm slovenly and depressed, and I don't love myself, and I'm not able to hold myself up as this beacon of cleanliness and light and peace, and shine that onto other people. You know, for a long time I was looking for somebody to save me. I was looking for people to tick those boxes of things I've done correctly. I was looking for reassurance. I was looking for information. I was looking for and yeah, it's not so like, obviously we're not like disembodied, disconnected beings which are just able to like rest back in love. But I think if you have that perspective of, and again, this Lutheran paradigm of like lean back on grace and to carry the grace through the world and give that to the other, but you need to lean back on the grace via your sense of self first, and then be able to give that. And I don't know, this is just, you know, this is just me theorizing on some things that I was thinking about recently, because yeah, I very much do ask for reassurance, and I very much do need good people in my life for me to be able to be inspired to do better. But then don't those people lead by example? Don't they lead by having principles, or lead by having qualities which, you know, perhaps all of us, we can't all wholly love ourselves, but we can love aspects. You know, I can lead in certain ways, my friends lead in certain ways, and all of this coalesces somehow, and it's just having that, just the principle of the ideal enough to strive towards, of loving your neighbour as you love yourself. That would be good enough, perhaps. And I just think, is it more useful because it's stronger intuition, it's stronger intellect, it's stronger love, it's stronger, because I regret being reactive. I think, am I able to be that for people, for these friends who I see who do not have that support system, or do not have the ability to accept or to express things which I previously couldn't accept or express, or could I in different ways? You know, again, theorizing, attachment theory, I'm disorganized, I will do both, I will be anxious, I will be avoidant. And I try to be secure, and I've always tried to be secure, just not on a Christian basis, more on a rational, detached, beyond any kind of reproach, security. Pride also, out of a sense of pride, out of a sense of, I'm not going to disgrace myself for you, fuck you. Out of a sense of desire to seem strong without actually being strong, because not actually having the intuition and the ability to perceive. Although in ways I did, actually. So yeah, I shouldn't sell myself short. And here, you know, here is me not being able to love myself because I will sell myself short. But I just think it's also part of this initial charm which I have. You know, I can tell you these things, and then a while down the road you might not like it, or you might like it. If I was secure, I wouldn't give a shit. You know, trusting in people when you need to know if you've done the right thing, or you need to know that they care about you, or you need to feel wanted, is hard. Like, it's really hard. And I think any kind of like modicum of trust that I have in other people is coming from like really good role modeling from people that I've met. And so I'm interested in like, how did that come about? Because it doesn't always come about from a position of security. You know, my ex was anxiously attached and fucking chased me, and I was horrible, but we're both also rational, so we understood each other, and expressed a lot, somewhat. Did I? Not initially, God no, I don't know.